So how do you like Bluegrass Sunday? You like that? So Brian goes off, gets married, comes back a bluegrass singer. Things have changed in his life. And also, things are going to be different in the sermon as well. Normally, we just go to the next passage, and we're in the midst of the book of Acts, and yet that's not going to happen today. We're going to do a sermon completely different than the book of Acts, and there's a reason for that. Let me describe that to you a little bit. This last week, I had the privilege of speaking at a camp in Northern California called Mount Hermon Christian Camp. It's a camp we go to every summer. I went as a kid. We've now, as adults, been 28 straight summers with our family. And every once in a while, they ask me to speak, and it's a real privilege to do that in a place that's touched my life a lot. I spoke 8 times this last week. It was a very busy week. And in the preparations of that, I was also speaking last Sunday. Let me just walk through a little bit of how this all works, because Sunday night is when family camp starts at Mount Hermon. There's about 700 people that come to this family camp each week for all ages. A speaker in the morning. I was a morning speaker, a speaker in the evening for adults, and there's stuff for kids and youth and all that. And the afternoons are open and free for families to have fun together and do things. But what happens is the camp starts Sunday at dinner and then goes through Saturday morning breakfast, and everybody leaves. And then there's another group that comes in just for a very short period of time. They come in for dinner on Saturday night. There's a concert on Saturday night. And then a church service Sunday morning. And a lot of those people stay overnight. And then those people leave. And then another family camp starts up again the next Sunday night. Well, I was speaking at that Sunday morning service last Sunday. And what you need to know is that on Saturday night, the concert is geared predominantly for senior adults. So 85 to 90 to 95% of the people that are at this concert on Saturday and then come to the service on Sunday morning are senior adults. And I've spoken a few times on this morning, so I knew that. So I prepared a message specifically for a senior adult crowd, and I titled it, Words of Wisdom to the Wise. And as I prepared it, a number of weeks ago, I thought, I need some time to preach this sermon at Mission Hills. I think it's important for Mission Hills to hear this, but I didn't know when that would be. But then as I was trying to get ready for all of those talks that I did this last week, and I had done the basic study for the Acts sermon for this week, but quite honestly, I ran out of time, and I thought, this would be a great weekend to preach this sermon. And so I'm just telling you, this is why we're doing it this week, and we'll get back to Acts next week. So that's the truth of it. But I want to tell you a little bit about my upbringing in this area, because I grew up in a home where respect to senior adults was a really big deal, honoring them. My mother was heavily involved with a ministry at the church I grew up in the senior adult ministry. She was not the head of it, and it wasn't when she was older, it was when she was actually younger and middle-aged that she was a part of this ministry where she would help. Her big job was once a month they would put on a luncheon for the senior adults, and they would have outside speakers come in and music groups and everything like that. And my mom was very much a part of those monthly luncheons. On top of that, she helped put on a yearly banquet called a Young and the Wise Banquet. And it was called that because it would be teenagers with the senior adults of our church. And we would get together, and then we would get someone where we would, have someone that we would bring as a guest as a teenager. And every year when I was in high school, I brought a man named Ralph Thompson. Ralph Thompson was a man in his 80s, a man I deeply grew to respect and love. In fact, so much so that when I would go back sometimes in college to visit my family for a weekend, I would go down to Ralph's house and spend some time with him. We'd go take a walk, and he would pour wisdom into me, and I loved Ralph, and he's been in glory for a number of years now. But that was my upbringing as part of our home of respecting the senior adults. 2 summers ago, when I was at Mount Hermon and I was getting ready to speak on a Sunday morning to one of these gatherings that was almost all senior adults, I was walking from where we were staying across this area, open area, where the people were mingling there before the service started, eating donuts and drinking coffee, and it was almost all gray hairs in that area. And as I was walking through, I had a knot in my stomach as I saw all these senior adults, and I thought, this isn't good. I know where the knot came from. We had just gone through some period here, just be real open about this, of changing things and changing worship style and not having a choir anymore and all of that. And I had gotten from our senior adults, let me just call it feedback. Lots of feedback and intense feedback. And I was still feeling the effects of that in a pretty significant way. And as I'm walking through, I'm having this knot on my stomach. I said, this is not good. But I do want to say this, and that is, some of the senior adults that go to this church, I would stack up against any senior adults anywhere as people that I deeply respect and love. We have some amazing senior adults here, people who are examples to me and examples to this church of people who serve God faithfully. They are generous with their money and generous with their time. They're people who are prayer warriors. They're people who have been great, strong leaders, people who use their gifts. Some of the best examples of faithfulness and endurance are senior adults that go to this church. On top of that, Jane and I are at a place in our lives where we are inundated, if you will, with the needs of senior parents. Both of us our parents are in retirement centers, both of them struggling with health issues. My mother has severe Parkinson's, and my parents moved last November into a retirement center. Jane's mom has had health issues pretty significant over the years and still does. My dad is starting to have some. Jane's mom's husband has some. So we're very much involved in a world of seniors, the health things as well. And we get that, and that's part of this whole thing too. And as I was getting prepared for this particular sermon to give to these people at Mount Hermon, I began to think about, what kind of a senior do I want to be when I get older? And to be challenged by this, because I'm at a unique place in my life. In August, I turned 50. And there's something, I've told you this before, that clicked in my life when I turned 50, because you realize every reason to think that there are more years now behind me than in front of me. And there becomes a greater urgency to live your life, to have an impact for Christ, knowing that, especially with actual pastoral employment and all that, there's less years ahead than there were behind. And to have an impact. And I'm going to be real honest, I have some concerns about senior adults spiritually, not just at this church, but in general. And so a lot of this comes from all of these things that are going through in my own life, and also what I see and view, and some concerns that I have with the spiritual conditions of some in the older generation who are followers of Christ. The Bible actually talks a lot about seniors, more than you might think that it does. As you read through, there's quite a bit of mentions. I'm just going to mention a few, more the ones that are probably more known and more obvious to us. Like in Proverbs, things like grandchildren are the crown of the aged, and I'm not there yet as a grandfather, but that day will be coming. And then in Proverbs 20, it talks about the splendor of the old is their gray hair, and I'm getting more splendor all the time. I asked my wife, I'd say, how come me and my guy friends all are getting gray hair and you and your gal friends aren't getting any? She says, well, that's taken care of by money. The Bible talks about, in Ecclesiastes, Solomon says that it's better to be poor and wise than to be old and foolish, and to not be one who takes advice anymore. There's a story in John chapter 8 where the woman was caught in adultery, and Jesus told her accusers were around her who wanted to stone her to death. He said to them, let him who is without sin throw the first stone at her. And it says that it was the older who walked away first, because they're wiser and they know that they've had a time of sin that they've struggled with. And the younger ones are still wanting to get her, and the older ones put their rocks down and leave. Titus chapter 2 gives very specific instructions to the older men. It says they're to be clear-headed and dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, an example of love, and one who endures. And to older women, it says they're to be respectable and pure, kind and submissive to their husbands, not slanderers of others, teaching what is good to the younger women so that they will know how to love their husbands and children. A lot more than that in the Bible, but I want you to take your Bibles and turn them to the Old Testament book of Joshua, to Joshua 14. Sixth book of your Old Testament, page 189 in your Bibles here, if that helps you at all. If you don't own a Bible, we want you to take that Bible. And I want to introduce you to a great Bible character, one that, if you're familiar at all with the Old Testament, you have been introduced to him before. And his name is Caleb. Caleb. Caleb was one of the original 12 spies of the promised land. If you know the story, the Israelites had come out of captivity in Egypt, 400-year slavery captivity, and now it's time for them to go into the land that God had promised them. And so Moses, the leader, sends 12 spies into the land to try to figure out the best strategy in order to conquer the land and to move, their people into it. And Caleb and Joshua were two of those 12 spies. And the report came back to Moses and to the leaders and to the people that the land was indeed an incredible land. It was a land, as he described it, flowing with milk and honey. They brought back even some of the fruit to show, how fertile the land was for agriculture. But 10 of the spies says, but we can't take the land. It's way too fortified. The cities are fortified. There's enemies all over the land. And on top of that, there's literal giants in the land. We're like grasshoppers in their sight and in our own sight compared to them. We can't take the land. Caleb speaks up and he says, no, we can take the land. God will do that. And in essence says, compared to the giants, they're like grasshoppers in the sight of God. I mean, we can do this. God promised this land to us. We can overtake it. But the people went with the majority opinion. And because of that, they didn't go into the promised land. And God literally sets aside an entire generation, people 20 and older, who are now going to spend 40 years wandering in this wilderness with nothing to do each day but eat and survive. No purpose. As they are going to slowly die off, God's going to have an entire generation die off until a younger and a more faithful generation will come into being. And it tells us in Numbers 14 that God calls them a wicked generation because of their complaining spirit and because of their lack of faith. Think of that. He sets aside an entire generation because of their complaining spirit and their lack of faith. It's one of the things that I have concerns about the senior generation now, that sometimes can be characterized by a complaining spirit and a lack of faith. A lack of God can do it again. He did in the past, He can do it again. A belief and a risk to go and take the hill once again, like you did when you were younger. Or as Brian would say, when you were shorter. Caleb and Joshua are the only two people from the older generation who are allowed into the promised land. The only two. So when they enter the promised land with the people of Israel, they are 20 years older than the oldest people. A very interesting and strange dynamic. And 40 years have come and gone. The Jewish people have now crossed into the promised land, and it is time to conquer it and to settle in, and it's going to be challenging. It's going to be difficult. And God says to Joshua in Joshua chapter 1, be strong and courageous. Do not fear, for God will be with you and will fight for you. As many of you know, we have 4 children, 3 daughters, and then our son. And our son's name is Caleb, named after this man in the Old Testament. And on his bedroom wall, on Caleb's bedroom wall, there is a verse that Jane painted a number of years ago that's still up there. It's Numbers 14:24, and it says this. But my servant Caleb has a different spirit because he follows me with his whole heart. But my servant Caleb has a different spirit, different from the other people. Why? Because he follows me with his whole heart. And I want to look at what made Caleb have a different spirit than the other people around him. First of all, as was just described by that verse in Numbers, Caleb followed God with his whole heart. This is why he had a different spirit. He followed God with his whole heart. Look at chapter 14 of Joshua, beginning in verse 6. Then the people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, in Kadesh Barnea concerning you and me. So he's replaying now, decades later, the conversation that Moses had with Joshua and Caleb when they had spied out the land. Verse 7, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. and I brought him word again as it was in my heart. But my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. That's the 10 spies who were against it. Yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. Even in spite of what the other people said, I wholly followed the Lord with all my heart, Caleb said. Do you realize that it is in the second half of life where most Bible characters fall and falter? And it would be safe to say that in our culture today, that Christian leaders, for the most part, that fall and falter, do so in the second half of their life. Why is that? In particular, this is an issue for men, and I would go so far as to say successful men. They begin to feel entitled. They begin to feel that they're owed something. They begin to feel that somehow they should be treated special because of all the hard work that they've done and all the years that they've put in. Some of them get bored. They get bored. Another acquisition in business isn't going to do them for them anymore. Another takeover isn't going to do much in business. They just get bored with life. The challenges just seem to be the same time and time again. Many of them get weary of the battle, and they let their guard down. They just get weary of it. They let their guard down morally, spiritually. Success also can lead to pride, and pride often goes before a what? A fall. It's the second half of life that often is the most dangerous half of life. And as we get older, it's easy to settle in and to not be moved by God anymore and not to have our heart wholly devoted to the Lord. I mean, let me ask you, when is the last time you allowed God to move you and to stir you and to change you so that you changed your behavior, so that you changed how you spent your money, how you spent your time, how you invested for the future? How you got involved with a cause because you just had to get involved because God has stirred in your heart and moved you. How long has it been? And Caleb followed God all the way to the end with his whole heart. He just doesn't falter along the way. The second reason that he had a different spirit is that he was not afraid to be in the minority. He was not afraid to be in the minority. I mean, have you ever stood against the majority? It's a lonely place to stand, isn't it? When everybody else is against you, or most everybody else is against you, you begin to question yourself. You wonder if you're doing the right thing. It's an isolated and lonely place to be. Caleb's not afraid to be in the minority because he's worried about what God has to say over what the other people have to say. And the 10 spies says, we can't take the land. And he says, oh, yes, we can, because we got God on our side. He promised us this land, and he's a great and mighty God. I don't care how big the giants are. I don't care how fortified the cities are. I don't care how many people there are in the land. We can take this because God's here, and God's a part of it. A number of years ago, when I was in college, I was sitting in the cafeteria with some of my buddies from the dorm that I lived in, and the resident director was sitting among us, and he was a seminary student. He was telling us about some things that he was learning, and he said this, and I've never done a study to verify it, but it makes sense to me. He said that in the Bible, spiritually speaking, usually the majority are in the wrong and the minority are in the right, spiritually. I don't know if that's exactly true, but it's certainly true on a lot of occasions where the majority are in the wrong and the minority in the right. So keep your finger here, but let's go 2 books to the left to Numbers chapter 13 to look at the story of Caleb speaking up in the minority. Numbers 13, beginning in verse 25. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, these 12 spies. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Those are the giants. Literal giants. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. So there's enemies everywhere. The fortified cities are massive, and there's giants in the land. We can't take the land. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses. I mean, think of it. They're all starting to murmur. They're starting to talk. What? We just came out of Egypt, and now we're in the wilderness, and now we can't go in the promised land. We're stuck here. What is this? And Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. We can do this. God can do this. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who came from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry. The people wept that night. They cried themselves to sleep in despair. Verse 2, and all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Turn back to Joshua. Joshua 14. Caleb is not a people pleaser. He's a God pleaser. Even though the report was against him by the vast majority, he still stood by what he believed was right and was God's thing. Now, if you're in this room and you're a senior today, and if you want to make an impact for Christ, I want to tell you something. You're going to stand in the minority. Because so many of your friends are like, you know what, let the younger generation do that. We've already been there, done that. We've been leaders. We took on big projects. It's time for the younger to do that. It's time for us to rest. You're going to stand in the minority if you're going to do this. So a few months ago, I'm in the lobby here, and my son Caleb is standing next to me. He's 14 years old. He's now about 2 inches shorter than me, and he's grown a ton this last year. We're standing there, and in walks from the main doors this older gentleman, and he's leaning over, and he's really feeble, and he's walking in like this. And I said, hey, Caleb, see that guy coming in the doors? He goes, yeah. I said, that man there that can hardly walk, he's a dude. Now, for us, I'll tell you what that means. For us, that means when I tell you somebody's a dude, I'm talking to Caleb about that guy's. He's a strong person. He's a courageous person. He's somebody to respect. He's someone to fall after. He's a dude, man. He's a dude. I said, he's a dude. Let me tell you about this guy. I said, this guy, 3 times a week he goes in for dialysis on his kidneys. Never complains. He has led a mission organization for all of his life. He's now not the head of it anymore. He's still there and involved and has his office, and he's still trying to reach the world for Christ. He's been all over the world doing stuff for the Lord. Recently, here at Mission Hills, I told Caleb, he took on some of our seniors and kind of got in their face because they weren't going to take the hill. I said, when I get older, I want to be like this guy. I said, he's a modern day Caleb, and I want you to meet him, Caleb. And so they met in the lobby. It was Dean Yoder. I guess Josh talked about him last week in his message. Dean died just a little over a week ago. His service was here yesterday morning. I had it in my notes several weeks before he passed on to talk about him. A modern day Caleb. All the way to the end, not caring what other people think. He's going to take on the world, and God's big, and we can do it. Caleb has a different spirit because he followed God with his whole heart. He was not afraid to be in the minority. And then third, he desired to impact lives until his death. He desired to impact lives until his death. So about a year and a half ago, I was at a conference with some pastors, and there was a bunch of us sitting in a room, and we were learning from each other. It was a really rich time. The guy sitting next to me was a guy that I've known for a long time, and he did pastor in another state, and he had announced to his congregation just a few weeks before this conference that he was retiring, and he was going to retire at the end of the year. So this was January. He had the whole rest of the year to go, and we're all in there, and we're sharing stuff, and we're taking notes, and I'm just lapping up all this stuff. And the guy next to me, this guy who announced that he was retiring, wasn't taking any notes. And during one of the breaks, I said, "So, no notes this year, huh?" He said, "No, I'm done." I said to the Lord that day, may I never stop taking notes. May I never stop reading books. May I never stop having conversations to learn from other people who have gone before me, and people who are younger than me. May I always be in a mode of learning in order to have an impact all the way to the end. May I never check out. And Caleb desired to impact lives all the way to the end. And a lot of older people have outlived their dreams. They're just done. They're just putting in their time, like wandering in the wilderness, but not charging up the mountains. Back in Joshua chapter 14, let's read verse 8 again and then go from there. Again, Caleb is telling Joshua about the conversation they had with Moses 45 years previously. Verse 8, but my brothers, the other spies who went up with me, made the heart of the people melt, yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, Caleb says, just as he said, these 45 years since the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am this day 85 years old. I am still as strong today as I was in the day that Moses sent me. My strength now is as my strength was then for war and for going and coming. Now stop there for a second. I know that's not normal to be 85 and feel like you were when you're 40. I can just say as a 50-year-old, that's not happening for me, because I feel different now than I did when I was 40. But what I love about God did a special work in his life physically, but what I love about him is his heart and his passion, no matter how he felt physically. Look at verse 12. So now Caleb says, give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day how the Anakim, the giants, were there with great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me and I shall drive them out just as the Lord said. Give me the hill country where the giants are and the big fortified cities. I want to take them on and fulfill the promise that God had given to me 45 years earlier. I love that. Then Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. Therefore, Hebron became an inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. All the way to the end. You know, God's not done with us until we're dead. And before I finish, I want to give 3 challenges. In particular, this is challenges I gave a week ago to the seniors that were there. I give it to our seniors that are here as well. 3 challenges. And really for all of us, these challenges apply too. The first one is the one that's the most difficult maybe to give, difficult for some to hear, but a really important challenge. The other 2 important challenges, but maybe not quite so volatile. First one is this. It's time to surrender the worship war. It's time to surrender the worship war. For the last 20 years, churches across America, including Mission Hills, has been fighting over the subject of worship. We think about how that must grieve the heart of God, that his people fight over worship. We really haven't been fighting over worship for the last 20 years. What we've been fighting over is a preference of the style of music. That's what we've been fighting about. So about a month ago, we went to a concert at Red Rocks. 5 of us from my family. One of our daughters couldn't go. but 5 of us went. We had never been to a concert at Red Rocks before. We'd been to Red Rocks just to walk around, but never actually been to a concert. And I was told by the gal who gave us these tickets that Toby Mac was in concert, and we like Toby Mac. My kids are amazed because Toby Mac's about my age, but Toby Mac is really cool. And me, not so much. And they let me know that. And I like Toby Mac, and Toby Mac, you know, he does some rap, and he does some other stuff, and he's actually incredibly talented, and I like him. So yeah, we'll take those tickets. I didn't realize there were other groups that were going to be there as well. So I was told before we got there that there was, but I didn't know when I took the tickets, and we decided to still go. And like there was 3 opening acts, which were anyway unique, and then there was the group, the guy Lecrae. Now some of you know Lecrae. Lecrae is a rapper. Let me say this: I will not personally put a CD of Lecrae in my car because it was okay. But I liked him. I liked him a lot, and as a person and what he said and brought, and in fact, he came out of the gang world, and now he's infiltrating that world to tell them about Christ. It's amazing what he's doing. So I really liked him as a person. Music, okay. Toby Mac ended the night. Like Toby Mac, that was cool. In between those was a group called Skillet. Yeah, so some of you know who Skillet is. Skillet is a heavy metal band, and the best way to describe heavy metal is just as loud as possible, and you might not understand any words, as much fire on stage as possible, all of that. That's heavy metal. Some people actually think that's what we do in our services. It's not even close, not even close. And we are in row 5. And in front of us, we're on the side in row 5, which means in front of us is a bank of speakers as big as a semi-truck. And my body is doing things I don't think it's supposed to do from the inside out. My heart is feeling every single beat of that portion of the concert. I kid you not. I can feel it from inside out. And then on top of that, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I have short hair, and I even put gel in my hair. It was moving from the power of what was coming out of the speakers. Boom! But my hair was moving. Some people would say, that's not worship. That is not worship. You know, I decided years ago I would never say that because I've been criticized so much about some of the worship things that we've done. Because worship's about the heart. It's not about the style. And you know what I saw as I was there making a vow that I will never again go to a Skillet concert? Next to me were my 2 younger kids and thousands more like them worshiping God. Now listen to me, please listen to me. This is not a comment about style, but we have got to give up the worship war in order to pass on the gospel message to a younger generation. Because as the generations are going, the younger are not coming to church like people in my generation did, and especially the generation before me did. They're not coming in the doors of church like they used to. And when they do, the number one reason that they return first and foremost is the style of the music. So we better have a style of music that they like and will want to come back for, even if it's not exactly what we want. And if it takes one day, I don't like the worship of in the church that I pastor, so be it. If it means passing on the good news of the gospel to a younger generation. You doing okay? Yeah? Challenge number 2. Mentor the younger. Mentor the younger. Those of you who are seniors here, you need to know this. The younger want to be touched by you. They want to get to know you. They respect you. They really do. There's a book that's out called The Millennials. It's a book about the millennial generation. It's written by Tom and Jess Rainier. And the millennial generation now is currently age 14 to 34. And in this book, it says this. It says, we asked about 1,200 research participants to agree or disagree with the following statement. Quote, I tend to have great respect for people in older generations. That was the statement. I tend to have great respect for people in older generations. Their responses were overwhelming. Of the millennials interviewed, 94% said they have great respect for older generations. Great respect. So let's leverage that respect and pouring our lives as older people into the younger and to mentor them. I'm going to give you just a few suggestions on how to do that. Pour yourselves into a young couple who would welcome your help and your advice. We don't walk up to them and say, you know what, we want to mentor you and 2 hours of Bible study a week, and that's not going to fly. But to say, hey, you know what, we've enjoyed meeting you a few times. We'd love to take you out for dinner, get to know you a little bit better. And then to begin to start a relationship and informally, help them along the road. Or maybe a way to do this is to adopt a single-parent family. There's a lot of single-parent families that we have here at Mission Hills, and on top of that, a lot of them, their grandparents don't live around here. People in Colorado, so many of them are transplants, and so you got to help them out, and to have grandparents in their life, and to help out a single parent, or help out just a young couple and a young mom with her kids. Maybe a way to do this is to pay for camp for some kids, just to reach out to them because the young family or a single parent doesn't have the resources, and to reach out and to offer to pay the hundreds of dollars now it takes to go to camps these days. Or to pray for a particular teenager, to take on a teenager and to pray for them, and occasionally show up at a ball game that they're doing, or a choir concert, or a drama at school, and invest in their life, and to mentor the younger. The third challenge, and the last one I have for us today, is for seniors to reach seniors for Jesus. A challenge for seniors to reach seniors for Jesus. If you want a mountain to climb with fortified cities and giants in the land, it's reaching seniors for Jesus. A lot of people are like, you know what? They're in their 70s, 80s. They rejected Jesus their whole life. They're not going to be open to the gospel. But listen, and not to be morbid, but seniors are the closest to the grave, right? I mean, on an average. And we can't just put them on a shelf and say we're done and we're just, done with you. We have to have a heart to reach these people for Jesus Christ. But it's going to take seniors caring about seniors. A few weeks ago, we had baptisms here. A lot of those were spontaneous. We had 71 people baptized a few weeks ago. No seniors. It's got to change. I mean, how exciting is it going to be when we see more seniors in the baptism getting baptized as they give their life to Christ as seniors? So maybe it's, as a senior, to move into a retirement center on purpose to become a voice for Jesus in that place, or to be part of the seniors ministry here, not to go do activities, but to reach seniors for Jesus Christ and invite seniors to church and invite them to these activities so they can hear the gospel. And in a Sunday school class or in a life group to pray more about seniors and their spiritual condition who are lost than about health needs. Seniors reaching seniors for Jesus. Because if seniors don't care about seniors, who's going to? Caleb said to Joshua, "So now give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke of that day. For you heard on that day how the Anakim were there with great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out, just as the Lord said." Let's pray. Lord, may you take this message and do with it as you please. May we be open in our hearts to the instructions from your word. May we be strong to follow you all the way till our death. And may we see impact in the lives of seniors. And may we become seniors that glorify and honor you, those of us who are not there yet. And Lord, I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.